Welcome. Today, we're going to dive into one of the most common assignments you'll encounter in university, the academic response paper. Now, this isn't just about summarizing what you've read, it's about joining a scholarly conversation. So, let's get started.
So, here's our roadmap for today. We'll kick things off by defining what a response paper really is. Then, we'll walk through the whole process, step by step, first understanding the text, then evaluating its argument, and finally crafting your own response. We'll wrap it all up with the key things you need to know to make your paper truly effective.
All right, let's start with the big question. What exactly is a response paper? I think the most important thing to get right from the start is that this assignment is asking for so much more than a simple summary of what you read.
At its core, a response paper is a formal academic task that really asks you to engage deeply with a text. It's a multi-step assignment. You have to first summarize the work, then critically evaluate it, and finally, respond to the author's ideas using your own formal reasoning and evidence. So think of it this way. Your paper needs to do these three distinct but very connected things. Summarizing shows that you understood the text. Evaluating shows your critical thinking skills. And responding, well, that's where you get to showcase your own academic voice. Now let's get practical and look at the first step. Before you can even think about critiquing or responding to a text, you absolutely have to build a rock-solid understanding of it. This is the foundation that your entire paper is going to rest on.
And what that means is you've got to look past all the little details to really grasp the big picture. You have to ask yourself, what's the single most important argument the author is trying to make? What is the central idea, the thesis, that holds this entire piece of writing together? That's your starting point.
Take a look at this example. Notice how one clear, direct sentence can capture the core argument of an entire text. Your own paper should really aim for this kind of clarity right at the beginning. It immediately tells your reader, I get it, I understand the author's main point.
Okay, so after you've identified what the author is arguing, your next job is to explain how they build that argument. What's the structure of their logic? How do all their supporting points connect back to that central claim? You're basically creating a map of the author's intellectual architecture. So, with that foundation of understanding firmly in place, now we can shift gears. Let's move into the next phase, evaluating the argument. This is where you really transition from being a passive reader into an active, critical thinker.
This slide really highlights a crucial difference. Description is just reporting what's on the page, what the author says or does. But evaluation is where you make an academic judgment about the quality, the validity, and the overall persuasiveness of the author's work.
And to evaluate properly, you have to ask some pretty probing questions. Is the evidence the author is using both credible and relevant? Do their conclusions actually follow logically from the points they've made? Are there enough examples to truly support their claims? Now, this is a fantastic example of a sophisticated evaluation. You're not just saying, the author used evidence. No, you're assessing the kind of evidence they used and pointing out a potential limitation. This shows a much, much deeper level of critical engagement. And as you're weaving together your summary and your evaluation, we have to pause for a very important note on academic integrity. When you engage with an author's arguments and evidence, you have a fundamental obligation to give them credit through proper citation. This is absolutely non-negotiable, and it's essential for your own credibility as a writer.
A strong evaluation also thinks about the bigger picture. You should be asking yourself, why is this text important? What does it contribute to the field? What are the real-world implications of the ideas that are being discussed?
This is exactly how you show that wider awareness. By placing the text into a conversation with other scholarly ideas, you're demonstrating that you understand it's not just some isolated document, but it's actually part of a larger, ongoing academic debate.
Okay, let's move to the final stage and see how this all comes together. Now that you've understood the text and you've evaluated it, it's finally time to construct your own thoughtful response and build your own academic argument.
The key word here is balance. You'll find that the most effective academic responses aren't one-sided attacks or just simple praise, they're much more nuanced. You should acknowledge what the author does well, identify any potential weaknesses, and then, based on that analysis, state your own clear, informed position.
A great way to develop your own unique position is to ask what's missing from the text. Are there alternative explanations the author didn't consider? Are there any significant counter-arguments that they maybe forgot to address? This is really your opportunity to add your own voice to that scholarly conversation.
And here's a perfect example of that process in action.
By introducing a different perspective, in this case, structural factors versus individual skills, you are demonstrating critical, independent thought. You're actually contributing something new, not just reacting to what's there.
So, this brings us to a very common question in academic writing, one I'm sure many of you have wondered about. Is it okay to use the first-person pronoun I in your paper?
The first and most important rule is to always ask your instructor, because the conventions can really vary by discipline. Now, if it is permitted, you want to use it with purpose and with formality. A phrase like, "I argue that," is often perfectly fine because it clearly signals your academic position. Just try to avoid more informal phrasing, like, "I feel that."
All right, let's bring it all home. We've covered a lot of ground, so let's boil it all down to the key components of an effective response paper. You can think of this as your final blueprint for success.
So when you put it all together, a truly high-quality response paper does all of these things and does them well. It proves that you have read carefully, that you've thought critically, and that you can articulate your own formal argument with clarity. It really is a complete intellectual journey, from comprehension to evaluation all the way to an original contribution.
So, as we wrap up, the final question really shifts from understanding someone else's work to creating your own. Now that you have the tools to analyze, to evaluate, and to respond, what argument will you build?